Welcome back to another podcast episode where we help aspiring developers get jobs and junior developers grow. In this episode, we're going to be doing a review on the Tech Academy. We're going to be diving into it. I understand that each of you, I think we had like one, we'll dive into it, but I think you guys had different programs you went through. So we'll be able to have different experiences for that. But like usual with all my episodes, this is going to be honest. Me, I'm not here trying to sell the programs. I'm trying to get real, honest reviews, and we're going to be critical. I want you to be prepared with the right questions to ask admissions, and I want to make sure this program is the right one for you. So, like usual, let's go ahead and do our intros. Robert, I guess I have a couple questions for you. What program did you go through? We'll start with that.
Okay. So I attended there on the full stack software development bootcamp, which pretty much encompasses everything they were offering. We covered HTML, CSS, SQL, SQL, Python, C#, and .NET.
Okay, cool. Are you currently a software engineer? Are you looking for a position?
No, I've been looking since I graduated in April of last year.
Okay, April of 2021. Okay, we could dig into that a bit. Where'd you come from? What was your previous industry?
I've been in customer service for about 30 years. In different industries, I've kind of floated back and forth. I enjoyed it, but I just felt like I was meant for something else.
Okay. Yeah, 30 years is a long time. Finally decided to make the switch.
Yeah, and I tried doing this back in 2000. I was actually, my first language was Visual Basic and COBOL. That's how long ago it was.
Okay, that's a while ago.
So I've been attempting this for a while.
Okay. Cool. I'm definitely interested to hear your experience with the program then. Thanks for sharing.
Okay, sure.
Sorry, in a second, we'll do the intros and then we'll jump into it.
Okay, gotcha.
Probably should have clarified. All right, Rhodri, what about you? Same questions.
So I did the same thing, and around the same time, I started in October of 2020 doing the full stack software development course. So same thing, all of the sort of a web development starter course, then moves into the C# and Python a little later on. They give you a brief introduction to SQL, and then they finish off with the .NET development cycle, very short .NET development cycle on a website that they kind of reset for students to just keep working on.
Okay. Are you currently looking for a software engineer position, or are you hired as one?
I am still, I'm not currently searching. I did find a job not too long after I stopped, but it is not a software development job, and I still would like one. So I'm working on my portfolio at the moment, and as soon as that feels ready, I'll be back out there looking.
Okay. When do you graduate?
Graduated in April of 2021.
Okay. And what industry did you come from?
Same as Robert, actually. Customer service. I was doing, right at the end of that, right before I started at the Tech Academy, I was doing testing for a website. And it was just mostly manual testing, so nothing really too technical. But yeah, until then, had been doing just technical support.
Okay. Emanuel, oh my God, I butcher every single name.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Emanuel?
Emanuel. That's fine.
Emanuel.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I did the Python developer bootcamp. And the reason why I chose that was because, based off all the research I did, I'm sure, you guys are pretty acquainted with it as well, but it seems like Python's like really popular. And you can pretty much find a job for Python. And so basically it was about a 4-month long process. I went on as a full-time student. So with the Tech Academy, you can either do part-time or full-time. Usually part-time will double your time. So I just thought it'd be smart to do that full-time, get the 4 months done, So I started in August of 2021 and I finished in November of 2021. And then following that, some things that we learned in Python, the Python Bootcamp was SQL, Python, of course, JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. And so, going into it, I kind of thought that it was just going to be mainly Python the whole time. But I'm actually pretty grateful that we learned, like HTML, CSS, and things like that, because those are some of the building blocks of websites and things like that. And on top of that, like not a lot of people know, but I mean, you can get jobs just doing HTML. Like if you're really good with HTML, you can create whole websites with HTML. You can create whole websites with JavaScript. You can create whole websites with CSS. Like, so, I mean, you don't have to be, dialed into like a specific programming language. I mean, you can do a lot of the markup language too, and that can help you also get a job. And right now, currently, I'm not doing a programming job, but I am doing like a sort of tech job. And so, I mean, it's still kind of up the alley. A lot of what I've learned from the Tech Academy, I've definitely been able to apply to my new job. But I am currently actively still looking. But right now, I've kind of put a halt on it, just mainly working on my portfolio as well, like Rhodri. And, just trying to get some things solidified, work on some concepts, make sure I really understand like what I'm doing. I've also learned like algorithms are like one of the biggest things you really need to understand for, trying to land a coding job or programming job. So those are kind of things that I want to really harp on and work on. And then what was the last thing?
Industry.
Yep. So the industry I came from, I've kind of jumped around job to job, just because I've always wanted to go into like the tech field, but I've never really had that break, if I would say. So I've jumped around like sales, customer service. My last job I was at, I built archery triggers, and stuff like that. But none of it really stuck. Like, I was just like trying to, really, get into the tech field and whatnot. Because I also joined the military. I'm in the Army Reserve. So I am actually an IT specialist in the Army Reserve. And so basically, I was trying to take that expertise that I had there, try to get kind of into the tech field, and then kind of work on my programming as I was, within the IT field, because coding and programming kind of is under that IT field kind of industry. And so after I got out of training with that, I just could not catch a break. So I was like, you know what, I think I'm going to have to do some things here to kind of speed that up. So I was like, you know what, I finally sat down. I was like, I need to start actually learning programming. Cause I picked it up back in middle school, but I never quite like took it on. Like I attempted a project. I tried to make a video game because I wanted to be a video game designer for forever. And that exactly worked out. I kind of got frustrated with that and gave up on that, which I really bashed myself about, just because with programming and coding, you really got to be patient, and you have to really you have to drill it. There's the only way you're going to get better at it is if you do it. And so it's not easy. And I know a lot of people think there's money in it, which there is, but it's really, you got to really like master your craft, just be patient and just like learn to, you got to grind. That's all it really is. So yeah, that's a little bit about myself.
Okay. I wanted to create video games myself. That's how I started out this entire journey. And I failed at that as well.
It's tough.
It is. It very much is. And I'm glad I did get into software engineering and web development, actually. But I might do it as a side thing. But okay, appreciate the journeys. So let's dive into it. Why this program? Why Tech Academy? Why do you initially choose it? So don't answer like why you think people should join it, but like why did you initially choose it when you were just doing your initial research?
Okay. Do you want me to start and then we'll go backwards? Or?
Yeah, we'll talk over each other a little bit, but anyone's free to talk.
So this kind of goes back into like the whole like Army Reserve type of deal. So I got out, got done with training in April of 2020. Or no, not April 2020. April 2020. And so I was thinking about going to college, and I sat down and I was like, okay, well, I was trying to go to college for mechanical engineering. That obviously didn't stick either. But I was going to school for mechanical engineering, so I was going to go in the fall. And so I sat down and tried to figure out things, and I was trying to see like if I could pick up some like programming or something like that over the summer. And so I was actually trying to apply for a job. That's actually how I came across the Tech Academy. So they had a job opening, and I was like, oh, it has something to do with programming. So I wonder if like I can probably like, I was like, I have a little bit of knowledge with that. I wonder if there's like any way that I could seep into that, because I was kind of naive too. Like I didn't really understand how the job market worked. And turned out I actually subscribed to one of their subscriptions. And so I just like, they just kept like, like hitting me up with emails, and we're just kind of like, hey, like, you can always start this, like, you can start the boot camp and stuff. And that's actually when I learned about boot camps too. I didn't know what boot camps were quite yet as well. So I went through that, and I was just like, I sat there and then I started researching boot camps and stuff. And I was like, dang, like maybe I should do this instead of college. Cause I was like, honestly, I really do want to get into programming. So I was like, but I was like, you know what? I'm already kind of like dead set on becoming a mechanical engineer. So I'll just come back to that later. And then fast forward to fall, went to college for a semester. Didn't really sit with me well. I just, I don't know. There's just something about school. Like, I don't know. I don't really like school, but I'd love to learn. So it's like, it's weird. So it's really weird, but I love to learn. So I was like, you know what, I got to figure out something, because the nice thing about college is like, that's kind of what gets you that experience, the skills you need and stuff like that for the job market. And it's kind of hard to do when you don't have a degree. But I've also learned, like, in my little time as well, a lot of how you get to places that you currently are at is networking, talking to people, getting yourself out of there, getting into forums, things like that. Just trying to put yourself out there so people can like receive you, so people can learn about you, people can know about you. So that's why I always get like, I love, the chances of, getting myself out there, and networking and whatnot, just because like, you're really not going to get anywhere if you kind of keep yourself holed up all the time. Kind of need to put yourself out there. And then finally I just sat down and was just like, dude, I really want to program. This is what I want to do. So I sat down, talked to my wife, and I was just like, hey, like, I really want to program. Like, do you think we can afford this? Do you think this would be a smart financial decision? She's like, if it's what you want, if it's what you want to do, and it's what you love to do, then let's get into it and let's knock it out of the park and work from there. And that's how I started in August of 2021. So,
okay.
Nice.
How about you two?
I had a similar story, I guess. I think that probably a lot of guys in their 20s who do a boot camp also just kind of don't feel like they like school is their thing. I was in college for a couple of years, and I don't have an associate's degree, but it was just a few credits away. But I don't know. I just couldn't really. I didn't feel like I was really going towards anything. I had tried a bunch of different things and jumped a couple of majors, and I finally was starting to think that maybe I was just going the wrong direction and I should try something a little more difficult instead of something that just takes a really long time, like as the result of getting a degree and then just waiting it out at the bottom of a ladder in a career, and just eventually in my mid-30s having a sustainable income finally. Like maybe I can do something a little outside my comfort zone and make more money faster. And I started learning more about programming, and I was relieved to discover that I was actually interested in it. I didn't start because I wanted to make a video game or anything. I had no goal other than just I'm not making any money, and I don't want to have to wait 10 years before I do that. So, but yeah, I ended up really liking it, and I decided to do a boot camp because after considering another 2 or 3 years at college, to get a bachelor's in computer science, or just doing it all a little bit faster and hearing some positive things about boot camps, I decided that I should just try that. And if it doesn't work, I can always go back to school.
Okay. How about you, Robert?
Well, kind of similar to Emanuel's. I was looking for just another job. I had left my one. I used to be a debt collector, worst job I ever had. And I decided, well, I probably going to be another customer service job. So there's this opening I saw online and said the Tech Academy. So I thought, well, I'll try that. And they kind of talked to me and they said, well, we're really looking for somebody that has more, like at least some knowledge with, technical, technical background at least in order for this job. And so I said, and they kind of decided, goes, well, we are a boot camp. Have you ever thought about coming to a boot camp? I said, well, yeah, I've been interested in technology for a while. So I kind of left it there and I waited a couple of weeks. I did some research, kind of went and looked at other boot camps. And I just saw where a lot of them were similar, but not really, because a lot of them you're kind of on your own. They're self-paced, which Tech Academy is also, but a lot of them didn't even have instructors available. Where, like I said, the big selling point with me was they not only do they have instructors available, but they have them 7 days a week, which is I never heard of before. So that's kind of what kind of pushed me towards that. I did start out trying to do this on my own. And I got to a point where I was using Free Code Camp. And I got to a point where I was getting so confused. And even though I would try to research, I was like, I'm just lost. So that's when I made the decision to do this.
That makes sense. Yeah, coding boot camps bring a lot of structure. They give you more confidence as well. I feel like, so it's interesting hearing your individual stories of like why you finally decide to execute on that. So I'm going to start with a couple concerns that I have right away. When you were describing the software engineering program, that sounds like a lot of stacks to go through. And you mentioned like with some of those stacks, it felt like you kind of just brushed over it. And so there are entire coding boot camps, like even just focused on like the JavaScript stack or the Python stack, right? And maybe this is for Robert and Rhodri, but for the software engineering program, did you feel like you got a solid understanding by the end of the program when you kept hopping from stack to stack?
For myself, I feel like it was a basis of one. There's a lot of learning you have to do on your own after something like that. But we got pretty detailed, a little more detailed than I thought we were going to get. But again, there's just a lot. I'm still learning today, of course. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I feel like we kind of went through some of it, but there's obviously a lot more to learn. But when you have a finite amount of time, you're really not going to be able to do that. I wish it was a little more detailed, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't want what I'm about to say to make it sound like I'm making a judgment of the Tech Academy necessarily, but I think for me, no. I did not get a solid basis of the more important stuff, which happened right at the end with C# and .NET. Even through the Python, I feel like I had blown past HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and SQL, and I just sort of things just started going in one ear and out the other a little bit, and I was just becoming accustomed to a workflow full of things that were totally new to me, and that, or not totally new, because I had some background and I'd looked into this before and researched programming various ways for several months beforehand. But I'd never done any C#, nor any Java, which C# is a lot like. So I wasn't very ready for that, and I can do C# stuff. If I pull up one of those websites where they've got like a list of little interview questions, the little problems you can solve, I can make my way through that stuff in C#, and I can find my way through C# code if it's already written. and I'm looking for something, but I definitely don't feel confident with it. And I can tell you, I felt way less confident with it back then than I do now after months of practice post course. But again, I think that a lot of that is my personality more than the fault of the Tech Academy. Though I think the way that the course is set up, it would lead a lot of people down my path.
Okay. Did you get to, so you mentioned it's self-taught. Did you get to interact with other students?
Yeah, there was a spot at the end of the Python unit and both that and the C# unit. And I don't know if it was this way for you too, Emmanuel, but at the end of the Python and C# units, we had a live project, which I had briefly mentioned before, where they kind of work you through a live development cycle on a website that they kind of throw together, or that you throw together. In the case of the Python one, it was really cool because that one you actually kind of do from scratch, which I liked.
So, yeah, I guess I was kind of curious because, if you worked with a lot of other people, you might be able to get a feel for other students, because you mentioned maybe it's just your personality, but maybe it's not. So I would argue it's probably more common than you might think. So I'm kind of just like looking at some of these programs, and software developer bootcamp, it's 40 weeks part-time, 22 weeks full-time. But then like I look at Python, or like, let's just even do C# and .NET. It's like 15 weeks full-time, 28 weeks part-time just for C# and .NET. But your program is trying to combine all of these in less hours.
Yeah. And I will say, to your point, that a lot of other students did seem to be the ones that I'd interacted with, because I was only ever interacting with other students who were exactly at my level of the course. They seemed to be in a similar vein now that I think about it. So,
okay.
I do have something I do want to add to that as well. And so, like, when I was looking through the courses as well, I actually wanted to do that. That was actually the course that I wanted to do, because I was like, oh, okay, full stack, like I'm about to be the real deal. I'm going to know all these languages and whatnot, right? And so something I really learned a lot through the bootcamp, just like Robert had said, was you're learning a lot on your own. I mean, not even just in programming, any technical job, like my job currently right now, like I have to read through a lot of documentation, like I have to learn on my own. And so it's like, honestly, I feel like programming, being in the technical field, is more attributed to people that are willing to learn, because it's really intimidating. Like it makes you an expert learner, if that makes sense, because I think a lot of people, like or just people in general, like kind of think like it's kind of laid out in front of you. And so that's why I kind of give a lot of like praise to like programmers and whatnot, because things are always changing, especially people in the technology field overall. Like things are always changing. And I even give props to Robert and Rhodri too, just because like there's a lot to learn. Like even with the Python, like I went through like HTML, JavaScript, all that stuff. That stuff was pretty like, like I blew past that, like that stuff was pretty, straightforward. But like when I got to Python, because all I did was the Python language, and the Python language is an actual programming language, because you can build things from scratch with that using like Django framework. That's what we did the live project off of. And man, like it went in one ear, went out the other. So it's like, I'm still learning now. Like, and so I'm sitting down, I'm going back over concepts that I didn't quite understand, such as like object-oriented programming and things like that, understanding like classes and stuff. Because I mean, at the same time, like I may be able to look at code and be like, okay, I have a better understanding, I feel a little bit more confident. But it's now coming down to, can you write code? Do you actually understand the concepts to putting code together? Because all it is you're creating something, right? And that's also another thing that drew me to programming, was you're like an inventor of some sort, right? You're creating something, you're creating something from scratch. Not a lot of people can say they can do that, right? So it's like, it's really cool being able to go into like a code editor and just type up all this and then just be like, hey, like, cool. Like, hey, watch this. Like my program can do this, Not a lot of people can sit down and on top of that, like it's really rewarding when your code works, because I mean, a lot of times nowadays, like you don't really see the fruit of your labor, but with programming, like, yeah, there's a lot of stressful, like hours, days, whatever. Like I've had times I wanted to rip out my own hair because it's just frustrating. It's just like, what the heck am I doing? But it's so satisfying seeing your code actually work, or seeing like the projects that they give you when they walk you through the code and understanding what the code does, going back through and seeing that work and seeing how it all works together and whatnot. So, I mean, a lot of it's just going to be learning. And so that's for anyone that's listening to the podcast, like that's something like I think the three of us would really want to stress is you're never going to know everything. You need to constantly be learning and be willing to learn, because you will get left behind all your peers if you just are a bump on a log, but you claim you want to do programming or coding or anything technical. You need to understand that you need to constantly be learning, because things are constantly changing every day.
I want to move it back to the original topic. I feel like you definitely are excited about programming. And you show that. You kind of illustrate, like, you know, I've talked about this in live streams and other podcast episodes. I feel like you have a lot of good advice for developers in general. But back to the original point, though, and the point that I'm making, like, it sounds like, and you just shared this as well, in your Python program, you felt like it even went through one ear and out the other. Like you are specialized in Python. You are focused on Python specifically. Like, how do you expect people that go through the software development program like Robert and Rhodri to like really comprehend when they're just adding C# and other languages to their stack? Like that almost feels, you're just going to get a lot of superficial knowledge, right? So my argument hearing all of you is I bet you a lot of developers are going to have more success finding a job if they choose a specific program and not that general software development program. Just hearing all of you, that's my opinion. What do you guys think?
No, definitely. I mean, even, and I'm not going to sit here and say like the internet can be very deceiving, you know, like, so you can't just go on the internet and be like, oh, what should I do? Like I've done a lot of that. Right. And now I'm at that course where I actually want to interact with developers, people that actually work in the field, and be like, hey, like, what things can I do to strengthen myself? What things can I do to start preparing to get into, you know, an actual developer job, right? I mean, you have a lot of, like, I've watched a lot of YouTube videos. Like, there's a lot of really good information on YouTube, honestly. I mean, YouTube's come a long ways. And so it's like, you have a lot of developers that will come on there and give really, really good knowledge. They'll just be like, don't be focused so much on the actual programming or trying to learn all these crazy languages. Cause like C# is a really good language. C++ is a really good language. Python's a really good language. Like you can find a job in all those things, right? JavaScript's a really good language. But if you talk to developers, they will always stress, or you look at any type of like, just like advice, they will always stress, learn one language. Because once you pick up one language and you can solidify yourself in that one language, or you can really understand that one language, all the syntax is pretty much the same. That maybe the way the makeup of the program is just going to be a little bit different, but all the syntax is pretty much like it all follows a general rule. So like that's why I went for the Python programming, just because I was like, well, with Python's so versatile. Like you can make games with Python. Like you can use Pygame. You can make games with Python. You can get into AI with Python, machine learning, web development, things like that. So I was like, okay, it's really versatile. So I feel like once I can solidify my knowledge on Python, then I can start moving to like C#. And C# is good for video games, or it's either C# or C++. I don't remember which one. I always get those two confused, but one of them is really good for like video games and stuff like that.
C++,
yeah,
C++. Okay, C++. JavaScript is more, it's better for like, that's a markup language, but that's better for like making your websites more dynamic, like more interactable, right? And then you have like HTML, which is basically the building blocks for your website. CSS is just to make your website look pretty. So I mean, if you can learn just to like be a master at one of those, because you understand just one of those languages, it'll help you with all the other ones. And so, I mean, even with like Robert and Rhodri, I'm sure they have maybe one that they dial in on more than the others.
Right.
And once they figured out that one, then they're like, okay, I have a pretty good understanding, and I've been introduced to these other languages. So now I can kind of just go back over those languages and then just start working on mastering each one of those languages. So yes, like you're saying, in your opinion, it is probably better, and probably if you don't want to be as overwhelmed, probably better to take one language at a time. But
I'd argue pick one language.
Yeah,
don't go back and master, because that's going to completely just like, it's going to take so long to go. I haven't even mastered. I would argue I haven't even mastered JavaScript. I've been a JavaScript developer for a few years, or 5 years. Like it. To me, when I hear this idea of like, man, like master C#, master Python, master Java, like, oh my God, that's going to be like a 10-year goal. It's like, damn.
Or at least get a good understanding. I guess that's kind of misleading, like saying master, but like get a good understanding to where you could sit down and write code, and then like you can basically like, you can interact with other people. And like, let's say like we're both Python developers and you're like a senior and I'm a junior, right? I can write code and be like, hey, like what's going on with my code? Could you look over my code and see what's going on? You could sit down and talk to me and tell me like, hey, this is all the things that are wrong with your code. And I can sit there and actually absorb that knowledge and not just be like, I don't know what the heck you just said, but I'm going to go figure it out, So just, I guess, have a good understanding about it to the point where you can tackle issues, you can create code, you can write code and whatnot, things like that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that makes sense. So what do you guys think about it? I want to give you guys a voice as well.
You mean as far as the whole bootcamp experience, or
as far as like being split between all of those technologies? Do you feel like, because I saw you shaking your head, Robert, of like you started narrowing down on one. Which one did you pick?
Well, the one I picked is C# and .NET, but I kind of wanted to bring something up. What I ran into when I started looking for work is, okay, I'm looking at these job openings. Okay, here's a job opening for a developer, but I don't know that. So here I go and try to learn that. Then I've got the next job opening that I see. Okay, it's something else. Now I got to try to learn that. So I had an overview of everything. And to be honest, they told us right in the course that this isn't a be all and end all. This is a basic. This is what you kind of need to know to get started. You're going to have to do things on your own. And I have to say that they did come out, they were upfront about that.
That's good.
So, but you're right. It was too much. Like what I'm doing now is I'm just learning React now, but I'm going back and reviewing JavaScript because it's been so long since I did JavaScript, because that was towards the beginning of the boot camp that we did that. So you're going from like you said, one thing to the next and the next, but by the time you get to the end, but I've always been kind of interested in C++, C# anyway. I kind of gravitated to that in my other, when I used to go to school also. So I kind of knew that's where I was going to end up at. The only other thing I'm going to bring up was when it comes to the part with job searching too, I've had just a few interviews, very few, but I was always under the impression that you should build projects if you want to get a job. So that's what I've been doing. But then I get to the technical interview and they're asking me console application questions, which was the very beginning of C# where, well, this isn't what I've been doing. I've been building projects.
I find myself torn between, I have, as I mentioned, I'm working on sort of when I say I'm working on a web development portfolio, really, I just mean I'm working on one bigger sized website with a lot of bigger concept, basic building blocks that would, be required for a website. I want somebody to look at this website and not even need to see my resume really anymore, because who's going to read my resume? It's not a particularly exciting resume. I'd rather just send them a link to this website and be like, hey, look, I went to a boot camp. I've worked in tech for a little while. I haven't actually done any software engineering, but here's what I can do. And
right.
And that's kind of where the projects come in. But I'm constantly thinking in the back of my head, well, I'm actually going to get to these interviews, and they're going to ask me to, reverse an array, and I'm going to freeze and be like, God, I know that, and yet here I am in the limelight wondering how to do it, even though if I was just sitting by myself, I would know how to do this right away. And yeah, there's all of this, console application, coding, interview question stuff to be done that I don't feel like was covered as part of the course material, not even a little bit. We were given the expectation that there's a chance you can become one of these people that just goes on to get a development position at a prestigious company. I think they had, as a page in the course, they had a page that just had a bunch of logos of, well-known tech companies on it. Like, people have gone on to work here, but, don't get too excited. It'll be difficult. It's a long road. Like, come on, man.
Yeah. That's, most coding boot camps are guilty of that. Like, I'm glad you just called that out.
Part of the sales pitch.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes that sales pitch, I mean, and that's part of, so like you also get a lot of distrust for the coding bootcamp industry and coding bootcamp graduates. And sometimes coding bootcamps they encourage students to sell themselves in a dishonest way. Right. And and sometimes students might even just do that because like they were promised a lot from the coding bootcamp and the coding bootcamp didn't deliver. They were promised a FANG job and the coding bootcamp didn't deliver for 99% of their students. Right. Because they always use those positions to highlight. So I would argue, so I'm a big advocate of go into it with the realistic expectations, because what often happens is when they sell, like, you're going to get a job, you're going to get this type of job, and then you get into the program and they're like, well, hold on, we're going to give you some realistic expectations after you already gave us, $15,000. This is what it's really like. But like, yeah, when you do that, people don't financially plan for it well. Right. And you don't realize, oh, wow, I got to look 6 months. Oh, my God, it's been up to a year that I've been looking for a job after I graduate. And it's like, that doesn't set your students up for success. And that's really why this podcast started. It's like to give students that transparency, that realistic advice. Yeah. So, yeah, but it did sound like they were at least up front with it, kind of like, it sounds like brushing on the fundamentals and like really covering a lot of stacks. And afterwards, you're going to have to get some more depth into some of this material.
Yeah, I think the biggest problem with that is that I don't feel like I had an idea of what to continue doing. There was some information about creating projects, and if you're wanting to get a different job than the one you have and you're in development, work on some bigger projects, work on something more difficult. If you're not in development, kind of keep practicing, work on your own little things, practice little interview questions. But general information like that, I can just Google how to get a tech job, and that's literally just a list of things I'm going to find.
Yeah.
So
yeah, no, I know exactly what he's talking about. Yeah, it's like, because you have that structure for the allotted time of the boot camp, but then after that, it's just kind of like you're on your own. So I went on my way to do research to see like what things do, and I've been fortunate enough to actually like interact with programmers and stuff like that. Like, I know an automation engineer that was telling me basically like ways to go about getting a job and things like that. And he was telling me, like, because I was like, hey, I'm doing this coding boot camp and stuff like that. He's like, I'm gonna be straight up with you right now. He's like, and that's when it really dawned on me too. Because I think I was like halfway through it, and he was like, you're not gonna get a really good job right out of doing that. And I sat down, I was like, yeah, like who's gonna give someone that's only had 4 months of programming experience like a between $60,000 to $80,000 job? You know what I mean? And so I sat down and I was like, okay, like I'm gonna try to figure out some things. So another thing he also told me was, what you really want to understand is like, so you want to do a lot of internships. So like, he's like, do about 2 or 3, that'll give you some experience. Now, the thing is, you're not going to be negotiating price, your wage and whatnot at those points. It's just going to be, you just have to be grateful for the experience and actually working for these companies and whatnot. So definitely doing internships will definitely help, because that's how you're getting your experience, right? Then he said another way would be if you could go knock one of their coding interviews out of the park and the interview process out of the park. But at the same time, being a beginner, you're not going to exactly know what's going on. So probably going to go to, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those and just, just be really, really bad at them. But at least it gives you kind of what to understand. And so that's another thing that they don't really talk to you about. Cause I mean, I had talked to someone before I even started, and I was like, so does it look like, I was like, so will I be able to get a good job after this? They're like, yeah. Now they're not wrong, but I'm thinking right out of the bat, right? But that's not the case. It's going to be like maybe 6 months to a year, probably even longer, depending on if I'm really trying to stay on top of programming and whatnot, because they're not holding your hand at this point anymore, right? So I totally get what Rhodri was going at with that, but
yeah. I would even argue, internships are great. The problem is, less than 1% of developers will be able to get one of those, especially without being in college. Like man, that's ideal. I would have wished I would have had an internship. I think that's like the golden ticket a lot of people are looking for initially too.
I had an offer one today, but it's non-paid. It's not really an offer. It was just she was going to talk to me about it.
Yeah,
but there's a lot of those. There's a lot of scams right now out there.
What makes it a scam, though?
Developers trying to look and find something.
Okay, so here's my challenge. Instead of building personal projects, was the internship full-time or part-time?
It was just going to be a part-time. It was only going to be for like 3 months, but it was non-paid. I never really got to talk to her. I kind of said, I thought about it. I thought, no, because I've been looking for 9 months now. I need something that's going to pay me.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to push us in, feel free to share your opinions after this, but my argument is, if you're going to spend the next 3 months just working on your personal projects, an internship with an actual application, even if it's unpaid, it's going to be better experience. But if you can afford that, that's the big trick. It's like, if you can't afford that, that's why I asked, is it part-time? I think an unpaid full-time internship is complete BS. I think it feels like it's taking advantage of people that probably need that income soon. So if it's like 10 hours a week or something like that on the side, I'm telling you that can actually look really good on your resume, but you have to make a smart decision on it.
Right. And I'm glad you brought up the thing with the financial part of it too. And I have to say they were upfront about that. I signed up for the ISA, and I'm glad I did, because then I didn't have to come up with that, whatever it was, 12 grand or everything. But they also let you know that if you sign up for the ISA, you're going to be paying a lot more, which I'm going to be, but I don't have to do that until I actually get a job in the field.
Okay. That's essentially what the ISA is designed for. There are a lot of interesting clauses in the ISA that can trigger that sooner than you expect it to. You have to read it. But that's a good thing that you're not. I'm just curious, does an internship, do you know if it triggers the ISA, if you would accept that?
I don't think so. It would have to be paid. You have to make a minimum amount of money. I think they told me between like 35 and 40,000.
Okay.
In order to trigger it.
That. That's what I remember.
Okay. So, all right, well, that's interesting. I want to ask you, so I think I actually want to end with two things. I want to kind of dive into some of the positives, because I'm super critical. My podcast, it's about being critical of these programs. I want students to be prepared. That's exactly why I do it, right? So I dive into the critical stuff. Let's dive into the messy stuff. But I also want to dive into some of the positives as well. So we're going to ask for positives and then one constructive feedback that you would give the program, kind of just a critical point. We'll do that at the end. So let's take a break from this. What's one of the best things that you absolutely love about the program?
It taught me how to research. I didn't really know how to do that. And to be honest, I was using the instructors a little bit too much sometimes, but it kind of pushed me to be able to learn how to do that on my own. Where, like, when I first started, I was scared to do it. Where now it's like, it's an everyday thing. Well, I got to learn how to do this if I want to build this. So I just go out there and do it. I'll go on YouTube or documentation or whatever I need to do.
Okay. And that was important for you because you were lost with Free Code Camp.
Yeah, exactly. I know that if I didn't do this, to be honest, I would have just given up because I wouldn't know what I was doing.
Okay. So kind of put that fire under your butt, and now you're making momentum. You're moving forward.
Right.
That is pretty good. It's a good thing.
I would have to say same thing as well, researching, but just the future as well. Like I know for a fact programming and coding is the future, and just all the possibilities of things that can happen with it, and just kind of like I definitely want to be part of that, like that movement, you know. And so that's something that really like gives me that passion, that drive for doing this. And I have like goals in the future of things that I want to achieve and things like that. And, I definitely think I can get there with programming and whatnot. So those are some things that kind of, I guess, were positive outlooks on the Tech Academy, just because it's like I was taking that extra step forward, just that one step closer. Even if I have like 1,000 more steps, that's just one step closer, right? I feel more confident in programming. I feel like I can actually research. I actually know what things to look at, and just like I know my way around code a little bit better. Even if I can't write code, or even if I can't, I know I can sit here and be like, okay, I can sit here at the computer for a few hours. I can actually put something together and figure it out. So,
okay. How about you, Rhodri?
I think one of the big reasons that a coding bootcamp is not a perfect solution for me is because I am not a particularly driven person. But ironically, that is also one of the reasons that it was good, because I am not. I had lost my job at the beginning of COVID. It was just like a no hard feelings kind of thing, where the client I was hired to serve no longer needed us. And so I had the choice between looking for something else or just, pursuing programming. And I pursued that for like 2 months, mostly fruitlessly, just kind of running around, reading things and trying things and just thinking, when do I like look for interviews? I don't feel ready. I don't feel like I've gotten any closer. And so I was like, maybe a coding bootcamp is the thing I should do after all. And did some research and tried it. And what I liked about the bootcamp was that it gave me, especially when I was right in the middle of it, right when I had finished sort of the JavaScript part, and had just gotten through HTML, CSS, JavaScript, vanilla web design. I had been practicing in JavaScript for like 6 to 8 months at that point, so I was pretty comfortable with it. And I was able to just kind of play I remember working on my silly, dumb website for like 12 hours in a day at one point around Christmas. I was like living by myself. My family had all like moved out of state, and I was just like hanging out and playing with my website all day for a week, maybe a week and a half. And I had a really good time. And that was like that kind of solidified the course forward for me. And I wouldn't have had that experience if I hadn't signed up for some kind of structured curriculum.
Okay. Sounds like it gave everyone the momentum that you need. I say this as well. It's like most coding boot camps will get you at least 80% of the way there. And it's that momentum that people lack. It's that guidance, that structure. And usually most coding boot camps give that, even if they're bad coding boot camps, even if they deceived you. It's like usually they give you some sort of outlines, and that's also the sad thing. It's like, then you realize I didn't need this coding bootcamp. If I just had this outline, I could have learned all this stuff and maybe just paid a small amount of money to like get mentorship with a software engineer or something like that, or career services. Speaking of which, before I forget, did they have like a career services program? Did they have like mentors?
And it's still going on. Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, I talked to her today. They're very good with that, I have to admit. Even though I've been out 9 months, she checks in with me like at least once or twice a week, seeing how things are going.
That's
that
awesome.
I've applied everywhere. I've been applying for 15 jobs a day for the last 9 months. So,
wow.
So they make sure that you're still doing it.
You are determined. Hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So some coding bootcamps shut that off after 6 months, which I think is ridiculous. It's like if you didn't help your student get a job.
Yeah. Yikes.
Yeah. Did you guys have a pretty good experience with career services?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. All right. Cool. Well, I feel like it's given me a good feel of it. I guess what I want to wrap up with is, does anyone else have anything to share that you think is important for students with one thing in mind? Like, try to keep in mind, who is this program for and who isn't this program for? But with that in mind, what else do you have to share about the program?
You have to have a passion for this, because if you don't, you're gonna be like a deer in headlights the whole way through. And then you have to be able to know that you want to do this even after all this is over with. And you have to be, as far as the job search part of it goes, for people that once they do graduate, is you got to be used to getting rejected, because it's going to happen. It's been happening to me for 9 months. I've had a total of 4 interviews in 9 months, and that's been it. So you can't, and I've been getting frustrated lately, but you have to be able to take rejection.
Yeah, I don't even know what to add to that. That sounds pretty like spot on. So
yeah, that's good advice.
Yeah. I think that's really it. Is that what I've discovered about the boot camp, having gone through it, and it sort of matches the sentiment I found in my research beforehand, which is that there are just a lot of people for whom the boot camp did not work. You know, you get a lot of people who are just like, should you do the boot camp? It worked for me. And, once I have a job in web development, which I will almost certainly have, with not too much time left, I feel like I'm on a good track. And it didn't not start with the boot camp, this path that I'm on. I didn't like it. I think if I, like you said, Don, if I had a sort of framework together of what I should go research, and I had the drive, it would have been very easy to learn everything I learned in the boot camp just online. I could have learned a lot more, because I would have gone down a lot more rabbit holes than I did during a structured curriculum. But in the end, I'm just going to end up being another one of these guys who's like, worked for me. And but I don't know if I really recommend it unless you're sure that you're super driven, because it can end up being a financial nightmare. It can end up costing you a lot of time. You just have to know that you want this, and be sure that this is the easiest way to get it.
Okay. Well, and if you're younger too, it's easier to make that decision. I'm old, so I'm kind of batting my head against the wall a lot, because a lot of places don't want to hire me because of my age.
Yeah, that can be a little bit more difficult. And also the idea of, like, just frankly, like, the older you get, usually the more responsibilities you're going to have as well. It can definitely be tough. My recommendation, so I think, I guess I don't want to go deep into this topic, but what I do want to say is sometimes people get, like, really stuck with things like they try to combat ageism and discrimination in different forms. And what I would be careful of, and I'm not saying you do it, but what I'd be careful of is you want to put your energy and focus into things you can control, right? Yeah. And I know it's kind of like a sad thing to say, but, like, the tech industry is moving in the right direction, in my opinion. It's pretty accepting, and you're going to have a few companies that just, like, kind of have really bad habits. Let them weed themselves out of your life. Put the energy into growing you, right? Put the energy into growing as a software engineer, as a person, build your soft skills. You invest the energy into the right things, and not look at those external circumstances. That will, you're going to grow a lot faster, and you're going to find a company that wants you for you. Because it's sad to say, because I see a lot of people just with different things on LinkedIn. I know they're frustrated. I know they're trying to apply for jobs and everything. And, sometimes their entire Twitter feeds are just, like, focused on, they just have a lot of complaints about the industry and hiring managers, et cetera. It's like, man, if you just, like, put that energy into building a complex project and, like, driving it into something that's really going to help you grow, it's like you're going to be so much better off with it. So, Yeah, I think that's my piece of advice with that. That's it. Yeah, I think this is good. I can't talk today. I started all throughout my entire life Q&A. It's a good conversation. It's a good talk. So I appreciate everyone sharing their experiences. Before we wrap up, let's do our outros. So for our outros, go ahead and shout yourself out. If you have social media, LinkedIn, you have a website, we'll start with you, Robert.
Okay, so I am on LinkedIn. My name is Robert McCabe, of course. You can contact me there. Also, I'm on Twitter at capital M, capital A, capital CODER, 62, which stands for Middle Age Coder, 62. So that would be the best places to reach me.
Okay, perfect. How about you, Rhodri?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Rhodri Thomas, RHODRI. That's how you spell that first name, and then Thomas, THOMAS.
Sounds good. How about you, Emanuel?
LinkedIn is, you're good. Don't worry about it. I would say LinkedIn as well. I don't really do a lot of social media. I mean, I have social media, but I don't really use it to interact. I think LinkedIn is probably my most productive one. So I would say, ever want to reach out to me, it'd be on LinkedIn at Emanuel Tameklo, last name TAMEKLO.
All right, perfect. We'll reach out to them if you have any questions. If you felt what they said was helpful, let me know in the comments below. Definitely appreciate all the comments. It helps boost the video in the algorithm, gets it in front of more people. But yeah, stick around for a couple minutes. But Robert, Rhodri, Emanuel, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah, thank you.